You had results about 2 weeks ago, wherein you showed HEP's growth of about a third, which is pretty impressive given, one, the state of the local economy, and secondly, the fact that your top line didn't grow at all. So where did that money come from?
That's right. Firstly, the top line was slightly flat, 3.6% down, and something that we're not worried about. But the reason why the headline per share grew is because our EBITDA grew by about 20%, and most of that profitable growth came from our professional services part of the business. Our business is into two parts. One part is what we call infrastructure managed services, and the second part is professional services. Professional services has grown very well in the last three years or so, and that's where you're seeing most of the profits coming from. If I go back, professional services as part of a business was about a third of our business about 3 years ago, right. And now it's about 51% of the business, and that's why you see that profitable growth coming in.
And the margins in that business are better than the other segment?
Absolutely. Professional services by its nature, you've got higher margins because you're providing some unique solutions. It's not a commodity solution.
Right.
You're commanding higher margins, and we're going to focus on that because that's where we believe the business will have a differentiation.
Sure. Now, GijimaAst is a black empowered company, so the assumption would be most of that business is coming from the government, and that most of the growth that you've been seeing has been coming from the government. Am I assuming wrong here?
Well, partly correct. Partly correct. If you look at our public sector business now, it's about 47% of the business,
right.
And the balance is private sector. And the reason why it's 47% is that in the last 18 months or so, private sector has not been spending.
Absolutely.
There's been a lot of pressure on the capex in that area,
yes, yeah.
And the public sector has continued to spend primarily to improve service delivery. I expect in the next coming 3 years things to normalize around 40% of our business coming from public sector, and the rest coming from private sector.
Oh.
Even though we are a black empowered company, the majority of our business comes from private sector and will continue to come from private sector.
Now, is that a deliberate shift, or is that a function of just the growing nature of the business? Are you specifically now moving away from reliance, if you like, on the government onto the private sector?
Not quite. It is the nature of the market. I think private sector, except for the last 18 months,
sure.
will be a bigger part of South African IT expenditure. Yeah. So I expect it just to normalize around those percentages.
Yeah. Now let's talk about that growth. Where will that come from now? Where are you going to find that kicker that's going to keep earnings moving along better?
Well, firstly, I expect the private sector to grow, as I said to you. Yeah. We are focusing our business on that professional services part of the business.
Right.
In that area, we are implementing unique industry solutions, both in private sector and public sector. I expect that to grow. As an example, we have some key unique solutions in the mining industry, right. That has taken up in South Africa and the rest of the world. I expect that growth to continue. So that's where the growth will come from. That's the first part. The second part is we are going beyond the borders of South Africa in a more controlled way, I must say. We're not going to be going
sure.
Full force.
Yeah.
We're looking at the rest of the continent where we have projects, but we want to probably look at their presence in 1 or 2 countries going forward.
Right.
And lastly, because of the investment in network infrastructure, I foresee what is called managed network services to be a growing part of their business in the next coming 3 years.
Yeah. Now, Gijima, to where it is today, has largely been a function of organic growth. Now, that growth going forward that you've just described now, is that going to be organic, or are you looking at perhaps acquiring 1 or 2 operators in the countries that you want to go in?
For the time being, I'm expecting our growth to be organic. We're not expecting to acquire any companies. If we acquire any companies, it will really be for a unique IP that we want to bolster our services.
Right.
As an example, in the last 2 months or so, we bought a small company, and all of it really, it's just to bolster our offering, but we won't be...
You prefer to grow on your own?
Absolutely. For the time being, yes.
Let's talk about those countries where you're looking at now. You told me earlier on that you have a presence in Namibia, but also, interestingly, you're looking at Zimbabwe.
That's correct. We have a presence in Namibia. We have 1 or 2 projects in Zimbabwe. We have projects in Zambia. We'll obviously be looking at Kenya and East Africa. Those are the areas where we'll be focusing for the time being. The reason why we're looking at Zimbabwe and Zambia in particular is because of all those mining operations where we have some unique offerings, and our customers are looking for us to help them.
And finally, Jonas, we spoke earlier about growing competition in South Africa's information technology industry, and hence perhaps you're looking across the borders. But What are the biggest challenges that you see, at least inside the South African market, going forward?
Well, firstly, as I said, the market is quite fragmented. You've got a number of service providers, and that also, I mean, there's a heated competition. However, we are seeing two other competitors come in South Africa. The first one is Indian companies coming to South Africa. Price point that is not easy to compete at, so that's one way of that we need to look at. But also we're having very large companies from China, IT companies coming into the continent and also in South Africa. So those are the two challenges that all of us have to rethink our business model if we want to compete.